Today we have with us Robert H. Gertner, the Deputy Dean of Chicago Booth School of Business. He is a professor with a special focus of strategic decision making, organizational structure, and social entrepreneurship. Welcome to Mint, Professor.
My pleasure to be here.
Professor, my first question is, Chicago Booth is perhaps the first school in the world to introduce part-time MBA and Executive MBA. Can you tell us what is the journey of the Executive MBA program over the last 6.5 decades?
I think over the years, Executive MBA programs have been focused to a large extent on people who didn't have the opportunity to get an MBA. And I think as the MBA market has gotten bigger and bigger, that's a smaller market. So I think we find that the opportunities and the reasons why people want to do executive MBAs vary a lot. So we see people who become entrepreneurs or thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, people who are switching careers, people who have been enormously successful and therefore never took the time to get an MBA. And so one of the big changes has been that it used to be very much a corporate sponsored type program. So executives from a corporation would identify people who were really talented, and they wouldn't have MBAs, and they sponsored them through the program. And sponsorships across the board have been declining, and people are owning their careers much more. They don't have lifelong jobs with the same corporation typically. So it's become a market that's much more focused on how individuals find opportunities. And then globally, we've just seen sort of enormous growth in business education generally around the world. And we see all sorts of different models and all sorts of different programs. But again, the opportunities outside the United States where MBAs are less prevalent are much bigger because fewer and fewer people have MBAs, have done business education. So the opportunity for somebody with more experience to say, hey, I want to go back and get some education has increased a fair amount as well.
Social enterprise and conscious capitalism are perhaps the new buzzword in the corporate sector. Do you see social enterprise a reality than just a rhetoric?
So I think there's an element which is rhetorical, and I think the definition of terms is very difficult. So what is social entrepreneurship? What is social enterprise? Is a very tricky thing. So at some level, as a good economist, I believe that almost all for-profit enterprises are social. If you're going to be successful, you have to be creating value for consumers, and creating value for consumers is a social good. So what's interesting and what I think is a new phenomenon is the growth of organizations, both business organizations that are either for-profit or nonprofit, as well as NGOs that are focused on taking a very business-like approach, but have as a fundamental part of their mission some social good, and therefore are willing to either trade off profits for mission, or are seeking to raise funds from investors who care about the mission and not just the financial returns. I think that's I think that is meaningful. I think that's a real change. I think it's potentially very important.
Perhaps no one will debate that the economy across countries is slowing down. Here, both the US and India feature there as well. Do you believe this slowdown is going to have an impact on the social enterprise? Is it going to have an impact on the corporate philanthropy in the US, India, or elsewhere in the world?
I think it will in the short run. I think the past 10 or 15 years have created something of a permanent change. I think consumers around the world, I think employees care about what corporations are doing. And I think that's been the main impetus for kind of this growth. And I think that's not going to disappear. That said, hard times will reduce investments by corporations in this area, I believe. But I think that we won't go back to where we were. I think the change is the awareness of consumers has changed dramatically, and I think we'll see corporations behaving differently in a permanent way.
Can you give us three key points that these economies like India or China, or the big economies especially, can focus on to bring back the investor sentiment, to bring back the foreign money? Because that is key for the growth of the economy.
So I would say, two right off the top of my head, and I'll have to think about the third. I think, the regulatory environment is really important, and I think trying to reduce the burden of regulation and to create closer to free markets is, I think, enormously valuable. And I think for the BRIC companies, for the BRIC countries, I think what you see is, you've seen this boom from just the enormous opportunities, and I think, as things settle down, the focus on some of the more the structural fundamentals become more important. And the other thing is, as somebody who spends lots of his time focusing on entrepreneurship, I think, creating an environment that's not just focused on the large corporations investing, but creating opportunities for entrepreneurs and seeing the investment coming as far as, financial investments in local entrepreneurs rather than foreign direct investment, I think is the other really big opportunity. And I think trying again to create institutions that foster that is also of critical importance. I'd say the third is just, as always, human capital development is so fundamentally important. And again, just, focusing on education is really important for the BRIC countries to take it to that next step, it seems to me.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure talking to you. I enjoyed it very much.